Hi everyone, I'm Dayna from Love Osway, and I'm here today with Rhiannon Wilde, and we're talking about her new book, Where You Left Us. So thanks very much for joining us to talk about the book. And I guess my first question was, for those people who haven't read it, if you can tell us what it's all about.
Oh, I'm so bad at elevator pitches. I feel like Where You Left Us is hard. It took us so long to blurb it because it's like there's a lot going on. But basically, it's about two sisters who come home together for the summer in their family home by the sea. And then there's a family mystery that ensues, and their father's having a really tough time with his mental health, and their parents are divorced and they have a complicated relationship. And the kind of center of the narrative is these two sisters who don't get on that well, but they love each other in all different ways. And I really enjoyed exploring that. And there's also a bit of romance. There's a lot of romance because it's a me novel.
Yeah.
So there was always going to be a lot. It's kind of my dream in that sense that I got to kind of explore different ways that we love each other, I think is the crux. But yeah. Two sisters by the sea.
Yeah, that's true. It's very much love in different forms. I agree with that. Now, one of the things, like, because we spoke last year when Henry Hamlet's Heart came out, your debut novel, and which I got to reread this time again, and was like, oh, there's bits I picked up that I hadn't realized the first time. I had completely forgotten about that little prologue at the start, which was just like, oh, okay. So all the feels of that. And there was a similar little prologue with Where You Left Us, which is also very cool, a different style. I remember when we were talking last year, one of the things you said to me was that you wrote Henry Hamlet's Heart backwards, where you knew how it was going to end up and you sort of then wrote it backwards. Coming to the second novel, which is very different style of book, did you, and it's just so incredibly different, did you do the same thing, or how was writing it different or the same?
No, I didn't. So I actually I still would say I'm a pantser rather than a planner, but I did plan more the second time because I knew what I was in for. I think I've had this joke with my editor a lot that Henry, like, I didn't plan it at all, and it was kind of magic because of that, but I also created a lot of work for myself in those editing phases because you have to clean up all of your times where you change the season randomly because you didn't know when it was going to be when you did your first draft. So I think I was more aware of those sorts of things that I would have to go back and fix, and I was preempting those. And also, I think to a certain extent, I wanted to do something that was plottier than the first book. I wanted to see if I could do something that was partially driven by plot, because I love to write driven by character, but I wanted to have an overarching plot that was like a framing device, if you like. I wanted to make my life easier, basically. I was like, I'm going to do a framing device. Other people do it with success. I'm going to try. So that's the mystery thread in Where You Left Us. But it didn't another thing that I've had conversations with my publishing team, it didn't really work that way because I had the mystery thread, but then there was the two threads of the sisters as well, and the romance threads. I think there's about 5 threads. So I don't know that it was the framing device that I thought it was going to be, that it was just going to take care of all of the arcs, because then I ended up having to make sure that each arc spun around each other in a way that was I guess fun for the reader to read. I still don't write in a linear sense, but I definitely planned much more. I had key beats that I wanted to hit. Particularly, you have to plan something like a mystery. You have to kind of and then with the sisters, I kind of subconsciously I made sure that because it's dual perspective, I had to make sure that each time you switch POV, you're not like, oh, I want to stay there. I think I needed to make sure I peppered the moments of each sister's arc well. So I think there was a lot more planning in this one. And I actually didn't know the end, which is the answer to the mystery. I remember sitting with my publisher and she was like, what's the secret? Like, what is it? When I'd given her a partial manuscript, and I was like, you'll have to find out, but I didn't know yet. Because I knew, so there's a big twist at the end, and I didn't know that when I was very first writing the manuscript.
Okay, because I'm terrible at picking up twists completely. Like, I'm just completely in with the characters, and I was like, I don't know what it's going to be. So that's nice for me to go, it was time coming. Okay, very cool. And do you then write? So do you tend to sit with one sister and then write the other sister, or do you have to kind of alternate between them as well when you're writing?
I think when I was first drafting, I would switch between them. And I don't write my scenes. I just physically can't sit and write like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. That is like anathema to me in terms of planning. I just feel really stifled. So I would sit with a sister and write key scenes a key scene that I wanted to write, like Cinnamon's first scene with Daisy was a big one that I wanted to write. And then I wanted to write her first scene with Will to compare those dynamics. So I would like sit with her for a little bit, then get a bit like, I want to do something different. And then I would switch over to Scarlett. So I pretty much, for the first draft, switched between the two pretty consistently. Like, I would just go back and forth. And then in the editing process, I looked at them separately because I wanted to make sure that they had strong arcs on their own. And I had to sit with what does each of them need to learn and what do I want them to go through separately, through like what's their arc for each of them. And so those are my 3 things. I had to isolate Scarlett's thread, Cinnamon's thread, and the mystery thread and see how they read and then weave them together. So for that second kind of the structural edit, I did completely sit with them on their own. And particularly, I think Scarlett's arc at that point didn't have as much to it as Cinnamon's. Like, Cinnamon's a stronger character. So she was, for a little while, she was coming through, like, she was a little bit more of a lead. And then I had to kind of look at Scarlett, and she's a softer, more solitary character, and think, what are the key scenes? What does she need to learn that is just as strong for the reader to go through?
Interesting. Because for me, I think I love Scarlett the most out of the 2 of them. Yeah. And actually that was
everyone's one or the other.
Yeah. And I suppose it is just who speaks to you. That was actually going to be my next question, because I think I can remember us talking about how amazing Lennon is in Henry Hamlet's Heart, and rereading it just recently, I was like, yep, I still love Lennon. He's still completely magical.
Me too.
So did you have a favorite character in this one?
Oh, that's really tough, but I do. And she's kind of a wild card. I love Daisy, who is Cinnamon's kind of, I guess, crush. Spoiler. Crush. But she is kind of a lame character where I didn't go into it with much planning in terms of like, oh, this is what this character is going to be. I just let her come alive on the page. And then my friend Holstein, who did the authenticity read on Daisy's kind of coming from a Chinese background, because Holstein then went over it and did another read of Daisy and Cinnamon together and gave me like proper editorial notes. Like, she could be, I was like, do you know, you could be like an editor. Like, Holstein gave me these great notes about like, because we had to change some timeline stuff. She was like, oh, I think their relationship could develop a little bit more subtly, their friendship, when they first become friends. And then all of the extra stuff that we added to Daisy, I just love her now. Like, when I read her, she doesn't feel like somebody I wrote. She feels like a real person comes alive. And I think that's also like, that's my cop-out answer, because I can't choose between the sisters. So because both sisters are, you know, things that I love and wanted to explore. So I don't think I could pick between them, but I think Daisy, I'm particularly like, I really just love what she ended up being. Because she's just got so much depth to her now. And I think that's why things like sensitivity reads are so important, is because you get just invaluable other eyes on it, saying, oh, what if this happened, or if she was a real person, she wouldn't say that the second she met someone, and you know, things like that.
Yep. Yeah, and actually I love that conversation they have about pronouns. And
that's a real conversation between me and Holstein, and I said, can I put that in the book? And she was like, yes.
Yeah, because that's a really interesting cultural perspective on pronouns, which is just fantastic.
That's something Holstein's quite passionate about, and I'm excited that it's in there because I feel similarly, you know, that I have quite like a fluid perspective on gender, and my own expression kind of fluctuates, and it's just such a different and nice way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy that she that's all Holstein's exact words. I was like, you tell me exactly what you think Daisy would say, and so we refined that down, and that's something I really liked putting in.
Yes. And so I mean, it's not a spoiler or anything like that. It's just saying that in the language, is it Cantonese, that there are no gendered pronouns. It's just everyone is they. So whereas in English, they we obviously have gendered pronouns, and that can cause problems when they don't reflect people who are non-binary. So it's very cool.
We make it a problem for no reason, is what Holstein's always saying. It's not hard to refer to somebody in gender neutral terms because a lot of cultures do it and always have. That's her kind of perspective. Yeah.
And I've always found that interesting too, then when you also encounter languages like German and French and stuff that have the gendered pronouns for objects and things like that adds another slant onto things as well, which it's just, language is interesting and dynamic, and
yes, definitely. I always try not to, like Daisy says in the book, I always try not to gender people until I know what their preferred gender identity is, and that's hard to do with some of our sort of Western constructs that are so gendered. So I think it's definitely food for thought. Particularly, I suppose, for older readers. I think teens know, they know what's up with that sort of stuff. Whereas I think people of sort of my generation, it's good. It's just and older. It's great perspective on an issue that can be made a lot bigger than it needs to be, or more contentious by people who just refuse to drop antiquated ideas.
So it's an interesting way to look at it, of going, well, yes, it's not the way it's always been, okay, in one language, yes, but in another language not. It's always been the other way. So very interesting.
And so it poses the question, just because it's always been, is that how it has to be?
Exactly. Yes. You know? Exactly. And particularly because language does shift and change over time, as all culture does. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
And now, one thing that I also found was interesting in both of these books is place, and place is very strong. I mean, Henry Hamlet's Heart is such a Brisbane novel, and which I love about it. And this one as well, I felt like Halcyon House, where they live, and Prince's Beach, it's just almost an extra character in there. And such an Australian thing too. Is it based on a real place?
It's based on kind of two real places, I think. It's the two, I wonder if I should reveal or if I should keep it a secret, but I think people know where I've grown up, especially people who know me well. So I grew up in New South Wales, so it's kind of, I was born in Manly, and then we moved years and years later to the Central Coast, and then we moved to the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. So when I was drafting where you left us, I went to my cousin's wedding in Newcastle, and I was doing kind of all hometown things and feeling, you just get a feeling when you go back to where you're from, that, you know, we'd been through the pandemic and it was 2021, so we kind of thought that it was over. This is pre-Delta.
Exactly.
And I think we were all really, it was just a lovely like celebration with all my family, and walked along the beach, and I don't know, it just feels different to where I live now, because I was, because it's where I was born down there. And I can move as far as I want and think that I've become from somewhere else. But as soon as I go there, it's like home. And the beaches in New South Wales are like so wild and beautiful, and there's more of them, and they're cold water. And I think I'll always have a soft spot for it. Whereas I think Queensland, where I live, it's a beautiful, pretty kind of touristy place. And the Sunshine Coast, I love Moffat Beach and Caloundra. So I think it's Moffat Beach and Newcastle, so like a combo of those two, which I like because it makes it more magical, because it's a fantastical place. It's not actually real, but it could be. It reminds me very much of like my mum, when she was a teenager, lived with my granddad. My grandparents were divorced, and she moved with my granddad to a house like right on the beach in Norah Head in New South Wales. And I think it reminds me of that, Prince's Beach, like those sort of beaches that fly under the radar, but they're really gorgeous. But then again, it's also like Moffat Beach. And the cliff is definitely based on Moffat Beach. That's where I go when I'm like stressed about writing. We call it my depression cliff. That's where I go when I'm like crying because I don't know how to incorporate my initial edit notes. And my editor will be like, I hope you don't have to go up to your cliff about these. Like my thinking cliff is Moffat Beach. So I think, definitely that's in there as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I did also want to just touch on the themes around this book, because it struck me as being a very brave book. I mean, both books, I think I would say, are brave books in different ways. And, it's a book about family secrets and about mental illness as well. And that in the book it almost traces back generations with Cinnamon and Scarlett's father, who's struggling with his own mental illness, and then Scarlett as well, with anxiety. And you sort of mentioned in the author's notes that it sounds like it's quite a personal book in that way, and I just wondered how it feels putting out a book about mental illness, putting this book out into the world, and what you hope readers will take away from it.
I think it's something I've wanted to do for a really long time, because anxiety and depression to a lesser extent, but definitely both, have ruled my life for such a long time, since I was in my teens. And it's hard for me to write characters that don't have anxiety, because I can't relate.
It's normal.
And I, in 2021, I was promoting my first novel, which I found really hard in terms of anxiety, all the things you do, particularly if you're in a pandemic, and I was trying to still do everything. And I kind of had a really bad turn with my anxiety, and that was what made me go, okay, I'm going to write it down. I'm going to see if this could be a thing, because I think as a teacher, it's something I saw a lot of students struggle with, and I was particularly good at dealing with students with anxiety because I know exactly what it feels like. And if I know that, like, when I was a teenager, I had panic attacks a lot. I went through a phase where I couldn't leave the house when I was about 19. When my first year of university, I had like a breakdown because it was very hard for me to adjust to, I moved to Brisbane on my own, and I was, doing university, and I had like night classes, and I just slowly descended my mental health. And it's something that goes right through my family as well. We're a family of anxious people, especially on my dad's side. I remember at my wedding, I found that really difficult as well. I hate being the center of attention. I love being married, but the wedding itself, I would never do it again, ever. And it was like a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I remember having a panic attack at the reception and having to go into my hotel room, and all of my like cousins and my nan and my aunts, who were all having anxiety, gathered around me helping, because they knew exactly what to say and how to help, and like looking at all their faces, and they were like, oh, it's okay, this happens to me, like do X, Y, Z, and they were all patting me. And I think so I think anxiety is something that I've been living with and familiar with for a long time, and I wanted to write about it because when I was a young person, there wasn't the language for it that we have now.
No. Yeah.
I remember when I was 10, I had a similar sort of breakdown, and because some things going on at school, and I couldn't go to school for 4 weeks, and they diagnosed me with like symptomless glandular fever, because they were like, I don't know why else she would be hysterical and feel sick every morning and not want to go in. She's obviously got some sort of long disease that just has no symptoms. And I had so many blood tests, and because they just had no word for what was happening. And so I think about that a lot, little 10-year-old me, and it would have like changed everything if I could read a story about what panic attacks were and what anxiety was and how you get help and how it ebbs and flows and goes away, and you're not always in breakdown mode. I'll always have anxiety, but it will. You can live with it. And you learn how to manage it is I think the key. For a lot of years in my early 20s, I thought that I could cure it. If I just each time I would get good, I'd be like, right, I'm cured. 2 years later, something would happen and it would come back, and I have to get my coping strategies out again. And I think that will be a lifelong thing, and that's something I tried to show through Scarlet, is that you can have that kind of, and it might have a bit of a chokehold on your life at certain points, but there's always hope, and there's always joy, and there's always strategies and people who will help you. And I hope young people get that from that, because part of that character was me reading. I was trying to write a novel when I was 19 and I had my breakdown, and part of it was me reading this. I tried to write a character with anxiety then, and I think I think it comes from that place of
Thank you so much, Rhiannon. I could speak all day about this book, and I would definitely encourage everyone to go out and read it. It's a fantastic book, and I just love all the messages on it. So thank you so much, and thank you for spending some time this morning talking about it. Good luck with the rest of the author tours and talks.
Thank you. Thanks so much.